Hi again, everyone. Liz Bennett, your moderator for today's session. Delighted that so many of you have been able to join us today. And thank you, as I've already said a couple of times, but thank you so much for all of the comments that are coming through in the chat box. It's really interesting to see how business pressures and pressures from other people in other roles in the organisation, other departments, can sometimes impact this hugely important topic and give us challenges around sustaining our ethics and our principles. I have no doubt that Penny is going to, Penny has already commented in the chat box on many of them, but I have no doubt that she will come back to this as she takes us through her presentation today. So thank you so much for prompting the discussion by your many comments in the chat box. My role as moderator is to facilitate today's session. That means that I will be managing the chat box. I will be looking for your comments, so please feel free to post any comment that you have in the chat box, and I'll be looking at that. If possible, I will raise it with Penny as we go through the session. But if that's not possible because of whatever reason, there is so much content to get through, then I will save the questions at the end. If you feel that you're not getting a response to your question and you need to, then all you have to do is just remind me of it by posting it again in the chat box. So comments in chat box, please, remembering also to send to all participants so that everybody can see your comments. Okay? The other thing I want to say to you is if you're seeing the slide and you would like to see it in full screen, if you hover over the left-hand side of your screen, a box will pop up and you can zoom in or out. So you can enlarge the slides or you can minimize them depending on your preference. So with those very brief introductions, let me begin. And I've commented on the first two slides there, so let me go straight into who am I talking. And I'm on the right-hand side of the screen there. My name is Liz Bennett, and I'm Head of Consultancy here at the Institution of Mechanical Engineers. And as I say, my role today is moderator. In that capacity, I'm also assisted with Rachel, who will be able to help you if you have any technical difficulties. So my colleague Rachel, again, reach out to her and I through the chat box if you have any audio or technical difficulties. But by far the most important person today is Penny Taylor. And Penny Taylor is your presenter for today, your trainer to take you through everyday ethics presentation. Penny is a fellow of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, a very, very active supporter of IMechE, including, as you can see from the slide, being vice chair of the review committee. Penny has had senior positions in the auto industry. She may tell you a little bit more about those, but senior positions in corporate life as well as managing her own business for a number of years now. She's a very important person to our training team here at IMechE, as well as managing her own business, and indeed has a lot of experience from her corporate life, from her IMechE life, and also from running workshops around the challenges that we sometimes have with ethical considerations in business. So without any further ado, actually, Penny, I'm going to hand over to you, and then you can continue your self-introduction if I've missed anything vital, and of course can begin today's session. So over to you, Penny.
Hello, can everybody hear me? I was muted because I was told that I was typing noisily, so it's really nice. I was answering all your questions, and obviously that was quite loud. So yes, I've got a nice positive response. People can hear me, which is lovely. Thank you all very much for joining me today, and I've really enjoyed the questions and the comments that have been coming through in the chat box. One of the things that has fascinated me is the number of people who say, our company has a set of ethical principles and they're common sense. But how often do people do things that you just think, if they had any common sense, they wouldn't do that? So sometimes common sense is not actually as common as you would like to think, and that's one of the reasons why it's a good idea to have a policy written down, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. So moving on. What I would like to do with you in the next 50 minutes or so is to talk through why ethics is important and to look at some specific issues. So I'm going to be asking you lots of questions in this webinar. What I want to do is get you involved so that there is going to be lots of polls, lots of questions, lots of things for you to do. So hopefully that'll keep you engaged with what I'm talking about. So I want you to know why ethics is important. I want you to be more aware of the everyday decisions that you take that have an ethical dimension. Often I talk to engineers and I say, tell me about a recent ethical dilemma, and they'll go, don't think I have any. But actually you are dealing with making decisions every 15 minutes, all day long, and each of those decisions has an ethical dimension that could well take you in the wrong direction. So it's just worthwhile opening your eyes and perhaps being a little bit more conscious of the effect and the impact that these decisions may have. And my third point on this, my objectives, is that for those of you who are heading towards IEng or CEng and are going to be having interviews in the near future, what I would like to take a few minutes to talk about at the end of the session is how you prepare for that interview, in that you will now be asked to take an ethical item to talk about during your interview. So have a talk about some of the things that might be appropriate for that conversation. I can see in the chat box that there are a few people who are having audio issues, but the vast majority of people I think are around and with me. So I did get quite a few positive yeses that you can hear me. So I'm going to plough on and leave the support people to deal with the people with the issues. Right, moving on. What I want to do, first of all, is to find out a bit more about you guys and your impressions of ethics. And in professional engineering, they produced an article following surveying 2,000 members back in October 2016. And they put together 8 questions. I'm only going to use 4 of them this morning or this afternoon. And what I'm interested in is I'm going to give you the 4 questions. And after we've been through all 4 of the questions, a poll will pop up on the right-hand side of your screen, somewhere near the chat box. And it'll give you about a minute for you to answer each of these 4 questions. So the options that you will get on each question are yes, no, or not sure. So it's very simple. You just have to pick one of those 3 options on each of those 4 questions. So as I go through the questions, it might be worth you having a think about it and perhaps jotting down what your answer would be to 1, 2, 3, and 4, so that when the poll pops up, you've already got your answers ready to go. So, the first question, have you ever been in a situation or made a decision as an engineer in which ethics was an important consideration? So remember, the answers are yes, no, or not sure. The second question, have personal ethical considerations ever affected your choice of job? So I can see lots of yeses in the chat box. So I don't need you to put the answer in the chat box. What's going to happen is I go through all 4 questions and then a poll will arrive. And when the poll arrives, that's when you put your answer in. So to make sure that you're clicking the yes on the poll, and then we will be able to get some data that says 80% of people said yes, or 20% of people said no, or whatever it might be. Please wait until the poll comes up when you answer the questions. So I want to go through the 4 questions just so that you know what they're going to be, and you can think about your answer, but don't enter your answer until the poll comes up. Okay. So question 2, have personal ethical considerations ever affected your choice of job? So has that affected who you decided to go and work for, or perhaps you were offered a job by somebody and then decided not to take it because of the company values didn't fit with the values that you hold personally? Again, the answers when the poll comes up will be yes, no, or not sure. Question 3, do you think your company takes engineering ethics seriously enough? And again, the answers will be, once the poll comes up, yes, no, or not sure. And then the 4th question, do you feel that the engineering profession takes ethics seriously enough? Yes, no, or not sure. And what we'll be able to do when we've put the poll up and you have answered is we'll be able to compare the percentages that have answered in each of these questions against the percentages that they found from the survey in professional engineer. So the poll has now gone up. I can see the 4 questions on my screen. You have a minute to enter your answer, and then you have to hit the submit button down at the bottom. So let's see how people answer these 4 questions. Remember, tick one of the boxes, yes, no, or not sure, for each of the 4 questions. And then when you've done all 4, click the submit button. And once the minute is up, we'll get some little graphs underneath the poll, and it will show us where the percentages are of what people are saying for this group. So I hope that's clear. I hope everybody can see the poll now anyway. So I've got a question on the chat box. Why restrict question 3 to engineering ethics and not to others? It's just because these were the questions that came from the professional engineering survey, and all I wanted to do was repeat a small sample of them to see if things had changed or if this group felt the same as the people who filled in the survey back in October 16. As regards whether they're specific to UK engineering, I believe the original sample were engineers in the UK, but I'm not imagining that today's sample will be specifically UK related. So again, that's an interesting question as to whether different ethical codes apply in different parts of the world. So the poll, I think it's got a little bit longer to go for those of you who haven't yet completed it. And don't forget to put the submit button so that your answers get added to the overall results. So I'm seeing in the chat box that there are a few people who can't see the poll. So on my screen, I have on the right hand side the chat section, and then down at the bottom there is an arrow that says polling, and you have to click on the polling and then the poll will happen. Heather, the countdown clock stops once you hit the submit button, so that you only get to see your 42 seconds.
Penny, it's Liz. I think whilst Rachel is sorting out the gremlins, maybe we can carry on in the interest of time and hopefully come back to what the poll result is. Sorry about that, Penny, but I think it's probably the safest thing to do.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Thanks for the update. So let's go back to the original questions. As I said originally, I wanted to be able to compare your results today against the results from the professional engineering survey of 2,000 people in October 16. So from the original survey, 74% answered yes to this question. So 3/4 of engineers have been in situations where ethics was an important consideration. So it is something that you need to be aware of. It is something that should be affecting your everyday decisions, not only the big decisions. Somebody mentioned earlier on in the chat box about their company providing a hotline. And there are lots of companies that do this, but they tend to be for whistleblowing on big issues, so where the company is doing something that it really shouldn't be doing. Whereas actually, on a personal level, your ethics will affect things like, one of the situations I came across recently was an apprentice who had forgotten his swipe-in card at work. So he'd asked one of his friends if he could borrow his friend's card, and he swiped in for him. Now, for me, that is an ethical issue, and you shouldn't be doing that. If you are given a personal card that you swipe in, whether it's clocking in time, whether it's security, whether it's fire systems, if you're given a card, it's for you. You don't lend it to somebody else. So there are some things that you might consider to be trivial, but there is an ethical dimension to them. So 74% said yes, they had been in this situation. 24% said no, and only 2% said they didn't know, which I find quite heartening, in that most people are aware of ethics, that it's not just something that there were not lots of don't knows, which would have worried me considerably. So if we move on to the second question, have personal ethical considerations ever affected your choice of job? On the original poll, there were 54% of people who said yes, and 45% who said no. Now, the conclusion that was reached from that in the original article was that personal choice is likely to be overridden by the pragmatic need to earn money. The sort of view that ethics are great if you can afford them, which is not really, as far as I'm concerned, an acceptable way of thinking about things. There are lots of people who have strong principles about the kind of companies they would work for or the kind of industries they would work in. So it's not unusual to find people saying that they don't want to work in the defence industry, or they don't want to work in fracking, for instance. Interesting point, Philip. Somebody who left a job because of ethics, and I think that's really important, and it's an often cited reason for people leaving a job, not necessarily one for them taking a job. So if you had a choice of two jobs that were equally well paid, you might well go for the company where the values and the ethics felt more comfortable for you, because it's a better fit with your personality and a better fit with the way you want to operate your life. Many engineers express a desire to help improve society, which might be something that you want to do alongside building a good career. Whereas there are others for whom it's a primary focus, and they actively seek out roles in which they'll be doing that. So perhaps working with companies who are working in the developed world, putting in, I don't know, water systems or things of that nature. All the decisions we make do have an ethical dimension, and we need to be aware of them and know what our own values are. I was interested that the next webinar that's coming up in January is about marketing and having an understanding of one's own personal brand. And I think part of your personal brand is knowing your own values and ethics, knowing the things that are important to you and that you will stand up for. And equally, if you find a company that has the same set of values, you feel much more comfortable there and can give of your best. There's a comment in the chat box from Andrew Thompson who says the ethics of companies are often not clear before taking the job. But as we established from the earlier questions before we started the webinar, many companies actually have codes of conduct and codes of ethics that they publish and that are available on the website. So sometimes a bit of research can actually help head off problems later on so that you understand a bit more about the corporate culture that you're going into before you take a job. Admittedly, there are quite a few companies I come across where what they say on the website is not quite what they live up to once you're inside a company, but that's a completely different matter. Question 3. Do you think your company takes engineering ethics seriously enough? In the original article, 78% said yes, which I think is very heartening. 12% said no, and 10% said don't know. So for me, the don't knows are slightly worrying in that there are people for whom the ethics of engineering has either not been something they've considered or something that they have not researched enough to understand about what their company is doing and what it says it's doing. I'm noticing some conversations on the chat about questions to ask at interview about how the company defines ethics and what's important to them, so that you get more of an idea about the ethics of a company before taking a job, before going to work for them, and then hopefully not having to leave because there is a conflict that their ethics don't fit with your ethics. As regards to what Stuart said in terms of the copy of the report, if you go onto the IMechE website and put in ethics of engineering, I think it will bring you up the professional engineering article, which was in PE on the 5th of October 2016. So yes, you can see all 8 questions and all 8 of the answers that they got from their survey. So it's up there on the IMechE website for you. So going back to, does the company take engineering ethics seriously enough? The clear indication is that most companies take their responsibility seriously, at least on the face of things. And as we've heard from some people, that once you're in the company, perhaps the values are not quite what they had said when they published their code of conduct. Oh, we have a poll. Excellent, Rachel's back online. So, if I just go back to question 1, from what I can see, the group that I have in front of me, have you ever been in a situation or made a decision as an engineer? We were originally looking at 74% who said yes. Here we've got 71%, which is really good. Then, have personal ethical considerations ever affected your choice of job? We have 50% on this poll, where 54% on the original survey. So again, it's really heartening to see that people are taking decisions about where they go to work based around their own values and what feels comfortable to them. 36% said no, so interesting that either they automatically apply to companies where they feel that the ethics would be appropriate, or perhaps they've never really been pushed to the extreme. So question 3, do you think your company takes engineering ethics seriously enough? So the original poll gave us 78% yes, whereas here in the group that have answered the poll today, it's only 53%. So it's interesting to think about the not sure number is quite a bit higher. So again, it might be worth some people doing a little bit more research onto what their company states its ethical position is, or perhaps it's just something that needs to be thought about in a little bit more detail. The numbers for no are not that different. In the original article it was 12%, here we've got 17%. But it's still slightly worrying that we're looking at maybe 1 in 5 companies where the employees don't think that they take their ethical responsibilities seriously enough. And then if we come to the fourth question, do you feel the engineering profession takes ethics seriously enough? So perhaps it's a slightly different environment, but when people who wrote the professional engineering article did it, they got 70% who said yes. Whereas with this group today online, we've only got 39% who said yes. So I'm wondering if that means the people online here have not done enough research about perhaps the Engineering Council's Code of Conduct or the IMechE's Code of Conduct, so that they're aware of what their responsibilities are when they become a member and they become registered with the Engineering Council. The no at 20% is about the same as the article found. The difference I have here is that the not sure is significantly higher at 27%. So again, it might be something that actually just needs a little bit more thinking about, and those answers would start to make sense a bit more. Thank you very much, Stephen, for putting up the shortened Code of Conduct, which I think is a good place to start. The original poll was taken by the professional engineering journalists, and it was about 2,000 people that they surveyed. Interesting point, Howard, that it's about the behaviour of the individual companies rather than the governing body, but it would be nice to think that the whole thing tied up together. And a good point from Philip about the difference between engineering ethics and general ethics. I don't see that there's a difference. My problem is that when I talk about general ethics, engineers think that things in engineering are kind of black and white, and I don't think that's correct. So talking about engineering ethics is talking about the ethics of engineering decisions. But I agree that ethics is aligned to morality and values and knowing what is right or wrong. But we all have our own view of right or wrong to a certain extent. And there will always be people out there whose self-interest overrides their views of right and wrong. And also the people who do the silly things that just don't even think about it at all.
Penny, it's Liz. Can I just come in for a second here? I'm sure, I think you have answered this, but I just wanted to check a question that Audrey posed a while back that actually Philip has gone a lot of the way to answer. And Audrey posed the question, how would you define ethics? Now you said there that you agree it's aligned to morality, but you agree with Philip, it's what's right or wrong. Would you give it any other dimension as well, thinking of Audrey's question, or is it right and wrong?
I missed Audrey's question in detail. It's gone off my chat box now, but for me, ethics is about values, morality, and it's the formalising of that effectively. So into a code of ethics or a code of conduct. So the written down bit that tells you what you should do effectively, or your personal ethics are that you know what is right and wrong and what is appropriate in different situations.
Perfect. Thanks, Penny. I'll invite Audrey to comment in the chat box if she needs something else, but it's not just right or wrong, it's the formal definition of that as well. Thanks, Penny.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I was just reading some of the questions that have come up. Some of it, somebody, Howard, said, in reference to question 4, the low approval rating of engineering as an industry, in that the actions of some companies don't seem to be affected by professional bodies. I'm not sure that I see that. I mean, we have had a number of recent ethical issues that have hit the publicity and major newspapers. So things like the VW emissions scandal, and a lot of the fingers of blame for that are being pointed at the engineers. But it's really interesting to think that as engineers, we are often given a set of circumstances and asked to find a solution to that set of circumstances. And if you're given the right prompt, you will find ways around rules, regulations, systems, because that's what we do to try and make things more efficient, more clear, more effective. And sometimes those cutting corners and finding ways around rules means that people take their brains out and actually don't think about what the wider implications of what they're doing are. So going back to my slides, so some really interesting discussions going on in the chat box. And some people who can obviously type very quickly, because I'm getting 4 or 5 lines of questions. But, thank you very much for participating. I'm sure there will be lots of answers along the way. So having looked at the bigger picture about ethics, what I want to do is to ask some of you some personal questions now. I have 3 ethical dilemmas that you could come across in your working life. So what I'm interested in here is for you to answer as honestly as possible as to which of these options you would take, so that after I've asked you these 3 questions, we can start to unpick what your code of conduct, your code of ethics personally might look like, and try and get some framework for how you make ethical decisions going forward. So, 3 personal questions, and hopefully each one of these questions will come up with a poll. And as I said before, this is about your personal values. So there's no judgment with any of this. All I'm interested in is, let's get an idea about which of these options you would take and try and think about how you make the decision. What is the process that you go through when you make a decision? So, question 1. You've just started work at a new company and have become aware that they use, and therefore you must use, some pirated software. You have told the IT manager that this is wrong, but he says that everyone does it. So when the poll comes up, you will have 5 options to pick from. Option A, point out to the IT manager that this is illegal and the company could suffer considerable damage to its reputation if they are sued. Option B, report the issue to a director or further senior manager. Option C, start looking for another job. Option D, inform the company whose software has been pirated. Or option E, something else. Now, I'm hoping that there will be a poll popping up at some time, but think about what, yes?
Penny, it's Liz. I've just had a message that Rachel's laptop has crashed again. So we've got real gremlins here.
Okay.
So we can't. I think people are just going to have to respond in the chat box. I'm really sorry, everybody. I don't know what's happening today.
Okay, no problem. So, thinking about those 5 options, if you're going to click on the something else, the E, I'd like a line in the question. So, continue. Nick says he'd quite happily continue using the pirated software. There's quite a few people who are taking these options. Quite a lot of A's, equally quite a lot of continues. I like the investigate further. Good answer. Continuing is so risky, yes, agreed. And equally, the escalating approach, I think, is really important. A, B, and C, all of the above. Okay, different. So when we come to make a decision like this, there are some people who will automatically go, there is one of these that fits. There are some people who go, I need to take an escalating process. I need to think about, I'm going to do this first, and if nothing happens, then I'm going to do this, and if nothing happens, then I'm going to do this. But one of the key things to think about with all ethical dilemmas is that it shouldn't be one end of a spectrum or the other end of a spectrum. There should be the spectrum, and you look at various ways of working through a middle ground of some sort. Yeah, very good question, Adam. How would this company like their own work and efforts to be pirated? But equally, it's interesting how many people have said they would continue or do nothing. So, you know, this is a real live issue for people, and it's about where your ethics are and taking a bigger picture view. So question 2, you attend meetings with clients with a senior member of your company where she is pitching for new business. Your colleague frequently presents examples of previous projects that were not actually done by your company. Do you, A, tell your colleague that if the client realizes they will be in an uncomfortable situation, B, point out that what they are doing is dishonest and unethical, and C, speak to someone higher up about this. D, continue as she's leading the presentation and has the ultimate responsibility, or E, something else. So I think Rachel must be back online because I'm seeing a poll in front of me with a submit button. So if you have an opportunity to fill in the poll, that would be great because it means we can pull everybody's answers together. But if you don't see the poll, then just go for the chat.
And it's Liz. Hopefully everybody can see it. And shall we all make a collective wish that Rachel can actually stay online this time, or rather her laptop can? Thanks, Penny.
So hopefully you can see the poll. Oh, Robert's asking me to add some further details to the question. If you knew of the pitched content prior to the meeting, how would that affect your decision? I'm thinking that if I knew she was going to present incorrect or inaccurate information, I would probably try very hard not to go to the meeting at all. So yeah, lots of answers. Not comfortable picking only one option. Thinking about escalation. There is no one single answer. There are often answers that are completely wrong, so need to be discounted, but there are rarely only one answer that is completely right, because ethics doesn't work like that. In some cases, it's a bit like the engineering design dilemma. There are lots of options to a design conundrum that are wrong, but there are lots of answers that are right equally. There is no one perfect answer that meets all the specification. It has to be some kind of compromise. And if you give the same specification to 100 engineers, they'll come up with 100 different ways of meeting it. So John says he's actually experienced this question, and the colleague continued regardless. So then, was there any further escalation? Are there other things that would have happened, or that action you would have taken in that situation? So I'm going to move on, as I'm conscious that time's running away. And my third everyday dilemma: things are coming up to Christmas, and I've seen this on a number of occasions. A trusted supplier sends you a case of wine at Christmas. Do you? A, keep it. Lovely, isn't it? And we all like a case of wine. Do you send it back, explaining that you're not allowed to accept it, or you can't accept it because it doesn't fit with your ethics? Do you C, send a picture of it to other suppliers to demonstrate how you should be treated? D, keep it but politely tell them please don't do it again? Or E, something else? And for those of you who don't drink wine, you could send it in my direction. So yes, there's a lot of people who work in companies. Somebody says it's about the quantity of wine, so that raises another question. If it's a huge case, if it's 100 bottles, would you send it back? But if it's one bottle, you'd keep it. There are lots of companies that have policies where gifts are unacceptable, but equally there is a third way. There is a something else about this, that it's about keep it but put it in a raffle or give it to charity, or raffle it and give the money to charity, so that you're not upsetting the supplier by being rude and being seen to be rude and sending it back, but equally you're not personally accepting it, so you can't be accused of favouring that supplier in future. So again, it's interesting that there is a third way in a lot of these cases. So when you come to making ethical dilemmas, it's important to rule out the absolutely wrong answer, start to look at the possible solutions, and there will be more than one, and then try and find a middle ground, a way that is acceptable on all sides. Yeah, so there's some good answers there about different cultures, that in some companies it's the only way of doing business, and in Japan, for example, it's about the value, whereas other people would automatically see it as a bribe. So it's interesting that we thought this was all common sense, but common sense has 101 different implications depending on the filter that you look at it through. So when it comes to the process of decision making, finding your way through this ethical minefield, and this is in order of hierarchy. Number one, some answers are clearly right, in which case do it. Don't even worry about it any further. If you know this is the right thing to do, then do it. Even if it means that your self-interest doesn't get what you wanted. Number two, some answers are clearly wrong, because people are going to get hurt, because you know it doesn't fit with what the company wants you to do. So eliminate those answers. Number three, don't just look at the extremes, do something or do nothing. There are lots of midpoints in between that, other options that are available to you. And number four, list out all your options. When you write down what your ethical options might be, you often have a moment of clarity of the one that feels most comfortable, the one that feels right. And if all else fails, imagine that you saw your actions on the front page of a newspaper. And if there is any shred of you that says, I would hate that because I would feel ashamed, I would feel embarrassed, then the answer that you are thinking of is probably not the right one. You should have a professional view that says, I will put things on the front page because I'm proud of the work that I do and the standards that I work to as well. Yeah, good point from Mark. He's been told that if you couldn't justify it in court, don't do it. So that's a really good answer. But for me, imagine it's on the front page of the newspaper, and if you can't stand up with your head held high, then don't do it. I've got two pictures here, the roundabout and the traffic light, and you might be thinking, what's that got to do with ethics? If you think about how traffic flows, traffic generally flows a lot better on a roundabout than it does with a traffic light. A traffic light is a very blunt tool. It's the stop-go. And so traffic comes up to the traffic light and has to stop. So it's very, do this, don't do that. Whereas with the roundabout, what you have is a set of guidelines that you are allowed to make your own decision about, depending on the circumstances that you find yourself in. And codes of ethics should be similar to this. They shouldn't be, do not accept a gift above £5. It should be more about, if you are given a gift, here are some of the things you need to think about to find your way through. So when your company has a set of guidelines, or if you're in a position of putting one together, try not to make it like a traffic light, because people will play the system, and it's a very crude tool, as I say. It's much more sensible to think about a code that says, in this situation, here are some general rules that you should work to, and allow the professionals within your system to use their own judgment, which is what you hired them for in the first place, so that they find their own way around each individual situation and each individual decision that they have to take. So please remember, the roundabout is to be preferred over the traffic light. So when it comes to ethical codes of conduct and codes of ethics, the things that make successful codes of ethics are the top three. That it's not about compliance, so it's not rule-based, it's not thou shalt or thou shalt not, but it's about values. It's about the people that we recruit, the values that they hold. Number two, the ethics policies should be integrated with other policies, not just stand alone, not seen as something different. And the third one, which for me I actually think is the most important, is that management are seen to be held accountable. So if there are any breaches of ethics codes, that the management responsibility, the management culture deals with it, and the guilty are punished, if you like. So often things are reported, and the people who are punished are those who report it, which is just wrong. And the results that we see from companies that have good ethical standards is where managers uphold ethical standards, 80% of the people who work there would recommend that company to potential recruits. So, recommending your employer to a friend, that my company is a really good place to work. And also 80+% of customers would recommend that company. So actually having a good code of ethics and applying it appropriately is good for business as well. And then the opposite of that, so where the managers don't support the ethical standards, we have less than 20% who would recommend the company to potential recruits. And I've just realised that my numbers don't actually add up there. It should also have been less than 20% of the customers recommending the company. Interesting question from Simon about cakes in the office. I'll come back to that a little bit later. So my final poll for you guys, depending on whether it works or not, is I'd like to know where you are on your registration journey. So I've got 7 options there. So people who are registered as CEng, people who are registered as IEng, people registered as IMechE. Well, the poll has popped up for me, so I hope it has for the rest of you. And then D, E, and F are working towards. So if you're in the position of working towards CEng, IEng, or EngTech, and G is people who are not registered and not planning to register. So you can either put that in the chat box or in the poll if you've got the poll. That's entirely up to you. So I'm interested in how many people are answering D or E, so people who are on the call today who are working towards CEng and IEng. Those of us who are already in the categories up at the top, already registered with the Engineering Council, it's not so much of a problem for us. But those who are working towards need to be thinking about their ethical position so that when they go for their interview, they have a case study to talk about. So this is the latest version of UK Spec, the 3rd edition, which again I hope those of you who are working towards registration with the Engineering Council are familiar with. Oh, interesting, Stuart. Should have been since 2016, everybody who goes for an interview should have been asked a question about ethics. There are two things that engineers now have to do explicitly for the Engineering Council, so to get registration at one of the three levels. And that is E4 to carry out and record your CPD, and E5 to exercise your responsibilities in an ethical manner. E5 was an extra competence that's been added in to UK Spec, and the guidance on the interview panels is that they should ask a specific question. Thank you, Philip. I'm very pleased to see that you always ask a question on ethics, and I hope you get sensible answers from the people who you're interviewing. So competence E5 requires candidates to provide evidence of how they exercise responsibilities in an ethical manner. So it's a really good idea if you can turn up to your interview with an example of something to talk about. And by that I don't mean something big and difficult like whistleblowing or like I caught my company doing something they shouldn't have done. What I would like you to think about is to talk about how you have been made aware of the company's ethical code of conduct and how it fits with your own values. So for instance, if the supplier sent you a case of wine and you know you're not supposed to accept it, you would have turned it down graciously or done whatever the company policy says that you should do. So formal assessment of E5 started in January 2016, and all applications should now be discussed at interview. Really good point from Rob there about ethics becoming more and more important. So when you look at something like autonomous vehicles, it's not only about the design and what the engineers can make happen, it's also about how it affects society and the societal changes that will come with that. So making sure that all our engineering activities are taking place for the good of society. And we also think about use, abuse and misuse of the things that we're designing, developing and putting out into the market. So the clear requirements from UK Spec are that you should give an example of where you have applied ethical principles, and you should give an example of where you have applied or upheld ethical principles as defined by your organisation or company, which may be in its company or brand values. So again, turning up prepared at your interview, having researched, having read your company's code of conduct, code of ethics, whatever it might be, and being able to talk about it intelligently and how it makes, how you make decisions in line with that code is what the interviewers are going to be looking for. So please make sure that you prepare something and take it with you when you go to your interview. So the things that we have been through today, I hope I have convinced you that ethics is important for engineers, not only in the way we conduct business, but also the decisions that we make and the products that we develop and how we interact with each other. I hope that you are more aware of the everyday decisions you take that have an ethical dimension, and most of your decisions will have an ethical dimension. Somebody wrote to me at the beginning of the webinar that they have ethical issues and conflict with their managing director because he will often overcommit what the engineering team can actually deliver or have the capability to do. And that's a really interesting question, because sometimes you're setting people stretch goals, but equally, are you actually overcommitting or promising too much that is just not going to happen? And then my third point on that slide, I hope you are better able to prepare an example for your IEng or CEng interview for those that are relevant, for those that it was relevant to. So this, I think, is where I hand over to Liz. This is the next webinar that's coming up on the 22nd of June. And as I said, an important part of Brand Me will be your own values and what's relevant to you. So I'm going to pass the ball over to Liz, then I'll get a bit more of a chance to have a look at the things that are going on in the chat box, and I shall be around for the next 20 minutes or so to answer any questions that anybody has for me. I hope you found that useful.
Okay, Penny, thank you so much indeed. And we had a lot of questions in the chat box and a huge amount of comments. In fact, many of the participants were answering each other's questions, which was great. There is, Penny, before I talk through the next couple of slides, I think we've probably got to start losing people because we're in the last couple of minutes. So there was one question asked by several people, including Stuart, I think was the first to pose it, and that was, can we have a copy of the PE report that you referred to at the beginning for the 8 questions, Penny? Is that possible, or can we send a link to people?
I was just looking. I've got the link somewhere written down, so I'll try and find that and stick it in the chat box. But you can actually get it through the IMechE website if you go and put in the professional engineering ethics. The article will come up for you.
Thank you. I do actually believe it's in the notes on one of your slides, Penny. Slide 9.
Yeah.
If you copy it there, that would be great.
Right.
And while you're doing that, Penny, do you want to comment on Stuart's kind of question about cakes that you said you would come back to? Do you want to make a quick comment on that?
Yes, that's quite a common one, isn't it? And I'm afraid it's one I'm guilty of, in that I think engineers are hugely motivated by food. So certainly in my management role, getting people to come to a meeting they didn't want to come to on a Friday morning would always involve bringing bacon sandwiches. Now, for me, that's bribery, but of a trivial level that I'm happy to admit to. So as long as it's not aimed at one particular person, I don't have a particular issue with that. So if somebody had bought in cakes and just left them in the kitchen for everybody to help themselves to, that's fine. For me, unless your company says otherwise. And one of the important things is that each company has its own code of conduct. So one of the things that we don't think enough about is actually using our company email accounts for personal emails. Some companies, that is completely forbidden and against their code of conduct and can get you into a lot of trouble. So it's one of these things where you really need to know where your company draws the line on the things that are acceptable and the things that are not acceptable.
Okay, great. Thank you, Penny. And everyone who's still here, Penny has said she'll stay on for a few more minutes after the half hour, the 1:30 UK time deadline, which is now. Just let me finish off, if I may ask for your time. Penny has commented on the Brandy webinar and made a nice link. It's on the screen in front of you now. Please register for that. It will pick up on this very, very important question of values, but also how you promote yourself through your own career. There's a link in the chat box to that and several other links that you may find interesting. If you want any more information on everyday ethics, of course, go deeper into what Penny's been talking about for the last hour, we have our workshop on the 5th of March. Again, IMechE website, link in the chat box will give you more information on that. And I do also want to signpost you to other upcoming workshops that we have in the next few weeks. Performance management, communication, and many more, which are on the IMechE website. All that remains for me is log out if you feel you need to, if you've got another meeting to attend. If not, Penny and I will stay here for another 5 or 10 minutes. Thank you so much for hanging in there during our technical gremlins today. It's never been this bad before, but thank you for persevering. Okay, everyone. Penny, I can hear you typing again. You may want to mute yourself in case you're asked a question. I'm going to mute myself. Okay, I'm going to mute myself now, and thank you. See you again in January. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye for now.
Hello? Am I still online?
Oh, yes, Penny, both you and I are still online. I'm just going to invite, if anybody has any more questions, I'm looking in the chat box for them.
The one The one that's drawn my eye is one from Joss. Could you give a good example to use during a CEng interview? The answer to that simply, I'm afraid, is no, in that it needs to be something about your job and your company, something that's relevant to you. So you need to understand your company's code of conduct, code of ethics, and think about how that affects your daily decision making. It doesn't have to be where there's a breach. It just has to be that you have thought about it. Thank you very much to everyone who's been giving me feedback. Feedback is a great thing, and I'm always grateful for that. If anybody would like any more ethics, I'm doing a one-day course in March, next March at headquarters, Birdcage Walk. I'm very happy to discuss further. Have a good weekend. Yes, thank you very much, everybody. I did post the link to the article that I mentioned further up the chat box. So it's 8 questions ethics in engineering article, which is on the IMechE website. Oh, it's come back up again. Rachel's just posted that as well. Interesting question from Phil about the ethics for recruitment agents, as their values are often at odds with my values. Absolutely. I did very briefly work in the recruitment industry back in my 20s, and by briefly I mean about 3 months. It was not, for me that was a really interesting ethical issue, in that their ethics did not fit with mine, and some of the things that I was being asked to do didn't make me comfortable, and so I didn't stay very long. A lot of these companies are very commission driven, which encourages people to perhaps do things that are not right for them or not right for their clients, because it is very competitive. And so some of the people who do really well in the recruitment industry are those who will stab their granny in the back effectively. I think it's really important to find a recruitment company, and I'm talking about a company rather than an individual, where you do feel aligned to their business values. There are some very good ones out there who take their obligations to clients and to recruit people to be recruited very seriously, but there are an awful lot of dodgy companies who are just out to make a fast buck. So again, I would say make sure that you find the right recruitment company for you, and they will do a good job on your behalf.
Penny, can I pick up on a question from James? James, I don't know whether you're still online. I can see that 75 odd people are. Can you get some sort of confirmation for your company records? I think, James, if you log on, I think we've given you the link already, the chat box. If you log on to the LMS, where you can download the slides to Penny's session, then is that an adequate record for you that you've attended if you actually get the slides through the LMS? And if James is not on the session anymore, and anybody, oh, you are, James, that's great. So James, does that answer your question? Yeah? There you go. Andrew's already received an email to say thanks for taking part. Yeah, great, James. Pleased to be able to help, thanks.
Sometimes we're more efficient than we realise.
Yeah, we can send an email as long as the laptops don't crash. Okay, I can see there are still many people on. Does anybody else have another question for Penny? If not, please feel free to log out so Penny can go and lie in a darkened room with a wet cloth over her forehead for having managed all of these issues we've had.
And thank you very much. I've had a number of messages privately, so thank you very much for the feedback. Feedback all gratefully received. Anything that anybody would like to tell me to do differently next time. I've already had 1 or 2 requests for including a definition earlier on, which is a very good point. A couple of other things that people have suggested, but some really positive feedback, which I'm very grateful for. So thank you all very much.
Okay, great. Penny, I don't think there are any more questions coming through, so feel free, Penny, to log out, I think, whenever you're ready. As I've given people an opportunity. I think some people may still be logged on, but have left to go and get a cup of coffee. So feel free to log out. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.